The Girl with the Silver Eyes, Chapter 4. Maybe Nathan didn't live with them, but he sure was there a lot. He came within 10 minutes of the time Monica got home from work, carrying a 6-pack of beer and a bag of groceries, arriving just in time to say goodbye to Mrs. H as she left. Mrs. H hadn't said anything, only, tight-lipped and grim, that she didn't think she cared for the job after all, and if Mrs. Welker could write her a check for today's wages, they'd call it quits. But why? Monica asked. What happened? Let's just say your little girl and I don't exactly hit it off, Mrs. H said, and the look she gave Katie was very much like the one Mr. P had sent in her direction a few minutes earlier. Maybe Mrs. H thought if she told the truth, everyone would think she was crazy. Anyway, Katie sighed in relief as the sitter vanished out the front door. Monica didn't let it go at that, of course. What did you do, Katie? Katie put on her blank face. I read most of the day. I watched to see if anyone swam in the pool, so I could too, but nobody did. I mean, to Mrs. Horndecker, you must have said something, done something to upset her. She called the office before I'd even had time to get there. Katie shrugged. I don't need a sitter anyway. I'm old enough to take care of myself. Katie, what did you do? Nathan breezed in then. Katie noted that he had a key and looked at their faces. What's going on? The sitter quit. Early this morning she called me at the office to tell me to find somebody else, and she wasn't staying. And Katie won't say what happened. Nathan stowed things in the refrigerator and added his frown to Monica's. Well, kid, what have you got to say? Resentment formed a tight knot in her stomach, although Katie's face didn't change. Who was he to get tough with her? My name's Katie, she told him, not Kid. Nathan's ears turned pink. Now listen, you little... Monica put a hand on his arm. No, Nathan, stop. Come on, let's get dinner. I'm hungry, you're hungry, we're all tired. Katie and I will talk later. I picked up a paper on the way home. I'll go through the ads after we eat and see if I can line up another sitter. She fixed a look on Katie that stopped a protest. And don't tell me you don't need one. I'll have to be the judge of that. If you get another one, Katie observed, she probably won't like me either. Nobody does. Why not? Monica demanded, forgetting what she'd said about waiting until after dinner. You must say or do something, Katie, to make people not like you. I don't have to do anything. They just look at me and they don't like me. They say I have peculiar eyes. I can't help it what color my eyes are, can I? She walked away, hoping Monica wouldn't think to call her back to do anything in connection with dinner, and heard Nathan mutter, See? Other people notice it too. She has got peculiar eyes, Monica. Katie got her book and retreated with it to her own room. It was hard to concentrate on it, though, and then when she could hear their voices in the kitchen. Finally, she didn't even try to read anymore. The Scarlet Pimpernel was too good of a book to ruin it by reading it with half her attention. So she laid the book down and crept to the doorway. She could make out their words then if she strained a little. Monica, there's more to this than you've said. I know there is. You were jumpy before you went up there to get the kid, and now you're a nervous wreck. What did you know before you brought her back here? What's wrong with her? Monica sounded as if she were on the verge of crying. I don't know. Honestly, Nathan, I don't. She's always been, well, different. How? Here, give me that. I'll tear up the lettuce and you get the steak. How is she different, besides those funny eyes? Well, when she was a baby, she never cried. I mean, never, Nathan. Not when she was hungry or wet or I stuck her with a pin. She simply did not cry. And I asked Mother Welker once a couple of years ago if Katie ever got so she cried, and she said no. Who ever heard of a child who doesn't cry when she hurts herself? Or any time? Katie leaned against the door frame, listening to the clatter of silverware and plastic plates being slapped on the table. And you never could tell what she was thinking by her face. Her face shows nothing. Besides not crying, she doesn't laugh either. Not around me, anyway. Oh, I know she resents the fact that I let her go live with Joe's mother. She thinks I deserted her, though I've tried to explain to her why I had to leave her. She'll be 10 in September, and I think she'd be old enough to understand something of what I've said. But she doesn't seem to. She doesn't want to, Nathan guessed. Maybe so. Nathan, it was so difficult. Even when I was married to Joe and we both worked, there was never enough money to go around. We ran up all those medical year bills the year before Katie was born. I had a miscarriage after we were in a car accident, and neither of us worked for a month or so, and it was horrible. And then I got the job at Curtis Pharmaceuticals. I had to get a new job because they wouldn't hold my other one open until I could get back to work again. And things were better for a while. The wages were good, and the girls I worked with were nice and friendly. I still write to a couple of them, and it seemed as if we were going to get straightened out financially. Katie heard the controls tick as Monica turned on the broiler to preheat for the steaks, and then Monica's clicking heels as she walked back to the sink. We wanted a baby, of course, and I was so pleased when I got pregnant again within 6 months. Joe and I weren't having any trouble between us yet, and then he wanted the baby too. It was funny. Monica made a little hiccuping sound, more sad than amused. We joked about it at work that maybe the drugs we were handling had some magical powers, because 4 of us got pregnant almost at the same time. And then I had a difficult time with the pregnancy, and Joe and the doctor decided I'd better quit working until after Katie was born. I was hoping to go back to that job with Curtis. I had to work. Joe just didn't make enough to keep us going and pay all the bills, which was part of the problem we had that broke us up, I suppose. But they ended it about a month after I left. Ended what? Nathan asked. The job I had. I mean, the entire assembly line on that particular product. They took it off the market for some reason. They never explained anything to anybody. But Gloria, she was the girl who worked next to me. Gloria told me they gave everyone notice and shut things down. Several of the women went to work somewhere else in the plant, but those of us who were having babies never went back there to work. We all ended up working for different companies. I guess I wasn't the only one with money troubles, but there really wasn't anything else I could have done. I wanted to stay home and take care of Katie, but I couldn't. Well, that happens to a lot of people these days, Nathan said. If the kid can't understand that, then there's not much you can do about it. But there must be something more than the fact that she's got odd eyes and doesn't cry that makes sitters uneasy. How did she get along with her grandmother? Monica sounded muffled. Maybe she was bending over, putting the meat in the broiler or something. Well, I was never really chummy with Joe's mother. She blamed me for the divorce, though it wasn't any more my fault than his. And even when our marriage was okay, Mother Welker and I weren't buddies. I guess it was just one of those situations where 2 people don't especially hit it off. So she never talked to me very much. But I think, especially the last couple of years, Katie made her nervous too. How? What did she do? Nathan, I don't know. She didn't come right out and say Katie was strange. She just sort of hinted around. For one thing, I know she thought any kid who read as much as Katie does, and she learned to read when she was only 3 all by herself, was different. But other kids have done that, so it wasn't just that. She never seemed to have any friends. I talked to one of her teachers once, and she acted as if Katie were different too, but I couldn't pin her down. She said there always seemed to be disturbances when Katie was around. I asked what that meant, and she was evasive. But it seems that kids don't like her for some reason. Yes, I was nervous about bringing her to live with me, and not only because of the added expense. I don't know what to do with her. This was all very interesting. Katie had eavesdropped on Grandma Welker's conversations sometimes, but all Grandma and her friends talked about were the other old ladies and what Pastor Gruden said at the prayer meeting, and recipes for things like rhubarb crumble. Katie edged a little closer. It was disturbing to listen to Nathan and Monica talking about her this way, but it was informative too. She'd never known about her mother working for the Curtis Pharmaceutical Company, or keeping in touch with the women she'd worked with there. What was the stuff you handled at the drug company? Nathan asked now. What? The drug you were preparing, or whatever you did, what was it called? What was it used for? It was called typanoromine. It was a painkiller, Monica said. Katie had moved far enough now so that she could see her mother. Monica turned over the steaks and closed the broiler door on them again. They come up with new medications and get rid of the old ones all the time, Monica said. Isn't there some salad dressing left? Nathan rummaged in the refrigerator door. French style. He put it on the table. Did you ever take any of this stuff? Taipan, whatever it was. I guess we all took some once in a while, when we had headaches or something. One girl took it for back pain. It worked fine. It worked, but they stopped making it. Monica, what if they stopped making it because it was dangerous? What difference does it make after all these years? If it was dangerous, it's no longer in use. Yeah, Nathan said, looking at her with his arms crossed on his chest. He reached up and scratched his beard. But what if it had already done some damage to you? I mean, they know now that some drugs are very bad for pregnant women. They can harm the baby, can't they? Monica forgot about the dinner. What are you talking about? That working for Curtis may have done something to Katie? What could it do? I mean, she's bright. She had the usual number of fingers and toes, and she's strange, Nathan finished for her. Maybe that's why. Maybe she's a mutation or something. You know, like if she'd had radiation. For a moment, Katie thought Monica was going to be upset, but then she laughed. You read too much science fiction. If it affected Katie, it would have affected the other women's babies too, wouldn't it? And they're all right. Someone would know if there was something serious. Are they all right? Have you seen those other kids? Nathan asked. Well, no, but I told you I keep in touch with several of them. They'd have said if... Her voice trailed off and Nathan spoke very quietly. Would they? Have you told anybody that you have a kid with silver eyes who has something very strange about her? Right then, the timer went off on the stove, and Monica forked the steaks onto a warm platter. Call Katie, let's eat, was all she said. It was a heck of a time to end a conversation, Katie thought.